All right. Yeah. So live streaming has started, and we have many of our contestants. Um, Toastmaster Imran was just said. Toastmaster Imran. Yeah. Uh, how many of our contestants participating in this session? All right. Okay, this connection has dropped. So, all right. Let's start. Let's start and let our panel moderator join. And I'm just informing him that I'm going ahead with the opening and the introductions. So, all right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this training session, which is also the 1037th meeting of Karachi Toastmasters Club. And we take pride in the fact that we can have a meeting at any time of the day, at any day of the week, anywhere. And as a club, we are also very humbled by the fact that our members are enthusiastic enough to not only take up projects like this, but also agree to deliver them and handle them on days as unfriendly as Monday. So that makes us who we are, because as a club, we believe that the amount of meetings, the speaking opportunities, and the training that we provide to our members is one of the highest in the world. So this is simple maths. We have 4 mainstream meetings. We have 2 advanced format meetings every month. And we have a host of combined meetings. On average, we are having at least 1 joint meeting with another international club somewhere every month. And that is separate from these Wednesday and Saturday meetings. And then we have training sessions like these. And we always plan these training sessions and discussions on days that we are not having our regular meetings, because that makes space. Because in our regular meetings, as Toastmaster Adeline has seen, we have at least 8 to 9 speakers, and it's next to impossible to make space for the longer projects. So I see that our panel has arrived. Everyone, please put your hands together for Toastmaster Fahim Razzaq.
Thank you, distinguished Toastmaster Talha bin Hamid. And I must apologize for a little delay. Time. Can you guys hear and see me?
Yes, we can. You know what? As soon as a person asks that question on Zoom, that is the moment they freeze. So
yeah, I think Zoom has some AI that the moment you ask that, can you see and hear me clearly? It immediately makes you freeze.
It's like, hello everyone, how's it going? Can you see and hear me? And it's like that. So yeah, he's back. All right. Yes, Toastmaster Fahim, you're back.
This is really funny. I've been testing my connection since 3 p.m. and it was working all fine until it decides to drop off just at the worst possible time. Can you guys see and hear me now?
Yes. Oh my God. Okay, Fahim, if you're listening, please don't ask this question again and just get on, because as soon as you ask this question, the internet decides to act up. So
all right.
Go ahead.
What? Okay, got it. No, not asking this question whether. Thank you everyone for joining, and thank you for giving your time on obviously a weekday. And we have a exciting lineup of speakers, really busy executives. So once again, thank you so much for joining us this evening. It's a really important topic. Obviously, it's about the upcoming International Speech Contest on 1st of January, just about 5 days to go. So I'm really hoping that this session would act as a catalyst for people who are just on the edge. They want to participate, but they are just on the edge. It will just tip them over on the other side. Those who are preparing it and almost there, it will just give them that last bits of important information and wisdom to deliver a master class of the speech in their upcoming contest. So without further ado, why don't I introduce our panelists? Our first panelist is Toastmaster Adeline. She's Toastmaster from Toastmaster Club of Singapore. Adeline is a world-class speaker in that she was a finalist in 2002 Toastmaster World Champion of Public Speaking. She believes that taking part in a speech contest is like arguing with your spouse. It's painful, may seem pointless to outsiders, and the better person doesn't always necessarily win. But you learn from it. She's a Sagittarius, and now that's her personal bit. She's a Sagittarius, which means she gets bored easily. In her career, she has been a lawyer, finance analyst, and is now an entrepreneur and running a mental health startup. So please help me welcome Toastmaster Adeline from Toastmaster Club of Singapore. Our next panelist is similarly very exciting, very experienced, is none other than distinguished Toastmaster DTM Sir Sarfraz Nazir. Sarfraz Nazir is a 5-time distinguished Toastmaster and is a 3-time World Championship of Public Speaking semi-finalist, where he took 2nd position twice. DTM Sir Sarfraz has completed all 11 pathways in the Toastmaster program. In our weekly KTC meeting, he is a continuous source of inspiration for all of us with his weekly speeches. And I've learned one thing about Sarfraz over the time that I've heard his speeches. He seems to have had many romantic encounters in his lifetime. None of them was initiated by him. That's ranging from a girl in a McDonald's inviting him to her house, to him finding a mysterious, beautiful woman in a hotel bedroom. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome distinguished Toastmaster Sarfraz Nazir. Our next panelist is Toastmaster Urusa. Toastmaster Urusa has been associated with Toastmasters since 2016. Over the years, she has held various leadership positions and at club positions as well. She has been a judge and chief judge till district level and division level. And currently, she is at District 122 and District 20. Now, that's a funny bit. Urusa finds people who are dumb or act dumb really annoying. That's her pet peeves. And as soon as I found out about this, I went onto YouTube searching how to act intelligent. So I hope I can avoid that. Please help me welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Toastmaster Urusa to the panelists. Now, our last panelist, but by no means the least, is, of course, distinguished Toastmaster Talha bin Hamid. Talha bin Hamid is an IPDD and a current VP Education of Karachi Toastmasters Club and Content League. He is also a president of Leaders Worldwide. Now, I have known distinguished Toastmaster Talha for the last 1 year, and I can say that we have learned so much from him, not only during the time at a club, but offline. The guidance that we get from him, the everything that even for this panel thing, I've had a whole lot of guidance from him, and the credit goes to him. And I'm sure I know he's not going to take it, but that's the fact and that's the truth. So please help me welcome distinguished Toastmaster Tala bin Hamid to the panel. Okay, so I mean, over the last 2 days, I've been overwhelmed by the questions that I have received from the participants, from the audience, and they didn't have just one question. Every single person had about at least more than 2 questions. And the interesting thing is that they have them variety of. There is an overlap, but it's not as extreme. So hopefully we can try and cover as many topics as possible relating to obviously the upcoming contest. So let me start with the first one. But before I do that, has anyone got any questions or any concerns with how the setup is? Okay. Okay, so the first question is, and that's the recurring theme between the participants or who are hoping to take part, is the choice of the topic of the speech. Now, in our weekly meetings, we can kind of come up with any topics that's close to our heart that may be relating to local issues, say the government issues, the education in the country, the hospitals in the country, and all sort of topics that we come up with. But in the context of international speech contest, participants have this, that what should be the topic? How can we get an edge by just choosing the topic, and to ensure that we are just not at disadvantage by not choosing the right topic? So why don't I start with Toastmaster Adeline on this one, please?
Thank you so much, Moderator Fahim. So I love this question because this is something that I struggled with when I was taking part in my speech contest. And actually, I lost my first speech contest, which was my club level speech contest. And the reason I lost was actually this exact thing, which was the topic. Because what I didn't realize then is that there are 2 parts to a topic. There's the story and the message. And they are both parts of what we call the topic. Now, for me, in a club speech, I always started with a story. And that's what caught me, that's what got me into trouble. Because I'll just share my screen because I've been sharing this with various people since it's been so inspirational to me. I'll just share my screen. Can you see my screen? Is it showing?
Yeah.
It should say which comes first. Is that what it says?
We can see that. Yes, that's right.
Okay, cool. Okay, so what I always started with the story when I was doing my club speeches. But when you look at the judging criteria for the international speech, and if you go into it, you'll see that actually a lot more weightage is given to the message. So what you want to do is actually start with the message. Now, come to your question, Fahim, can I use something that is local context? I would say the story can be local context, but the message must be universal. So it must apply to, and what does universal, I'll come back to this one in a while. What does universal mean? Universal means anyone who's human can identify with it, not just people from a certain country or certain background or certain age or certain race or gender and all that, right? It must be so universal. And if you can see the screen, finding your message. Universal things are basically things like love, experiencing love. All of us as humans want to experience love. Failure. All of us as humans have experienced failure. How do we bounce back from that? So these are universal human themes. So what I would do is start with a universal theme. Then you try and figure out what of all these themes, what is something that is very, very true, very personal to you. It can be something that you've always held true in your whole life, something that has changed your life, inspired you, something that your parents have always told you. Among all these, what are some things that have really resonated with you? And then the next filter I would use, so 2 filters, 3 filters. First filter, universal themes. Second, something that is personal to you. And third, something that's contemporary, something that people in your audience are worried about. Now, if you're planning for this speech to go outside of Pakistan, then you might think of things that, you know, around the world, everyone is facing, right? The cost of living crisis, fear about changes in technology, is my job secure? You know, there's some of these bigger themes, but if you're going to keep it within your club context, there might be something that's a bit more narrow, but if you can go broad, why not go broad? That way your speech can go to a wider audience. So that part, I would say, you know, the story can be local, can be obviously very personal, but the message needs to be universal. And the way I think about it also is, here's what I like to share. The story is your gift to yourself, because it's a fantastic story. That's why you want to tell us the story, right? You relive that moment, whether it was your happiest moment of your life, it was a moment that changed your life. That story is your gift to yourself. But the message is the gift to the audience. So if you start with the message, if you start with what's the gift that I'm going to give the audience that they're going to take away, and then support that with a story. So hopefully that answers your question. How do I find a topic that would work for a contest? Back to you, Toastmaster Fahim.
Thank you so much, Toastmaster Adeline. That's a really cracking start, and give us what to talk about that as well. Especially really like that the egg and the chicken thing, and kind of the analogy with the speech there. Why don't I go to DTM Sarfraz here, because you were obviously the semi-finalist, so you know this, you have experienced this, how to do it. So what is your take on it, sir?
Thank you, Toastmaster Fahim. First is deciding why you are competing. I've heard some people say, well, it'll be a good experience. Some people want to win. Now, if you have a story that you're dying to tell and you don't care whether you win or not, then you tell that story. But if you are planning on winning that contest, then you have to find out what it takes to win. And as Adeline mentioned, universal appeal. Not only it has to have universal appeal, meaning any audience throughout the world can understand what you're talking about. It also has to be something that's relatable, something that's unique. Most of the messages that are presented in winning speeches are not new, but how they present them, the uniqueness, the twist. For example, in District 25 last year, someone won a club contest because there were only 2 contestants. His speech was on affirmations, saying that, hey, I was 300 pounds overweight, I had $80,000 in student loans, and a friend of mine recommended a book, and book said affirmations. And then I started telling myself, I am successful, I am successful. The good thing or fortunate thing for this speaker was that area and division were not strong. And that happens. There are some divisions where second place winners could easily win a semifinal, but their competition is tough. And then there's some divisions or even some districts in the past used to be where it was very easy to win. So he made it to the district. But it's not relatable. Just by saying, I'm successful, I'm successful, I'm successful, he said, oh, I lost 100 pounds, and that's not relatable. If that was the case, I don't have to worry about the story or topic in speech. All I have to do is every morning get up and say, I'm a champion, I'm a world champion of public speaking, and I'll be a world champion. No, that doesn't work that. So message is important. What message? Message has to be something that helps relieve the pain. Everybody suffers some kind of pain, or people have problems and they want a solution. If you have some kind of pain and say, hey, my back is hurting, you go to doctor. You want the doctor to be able to help you with that pain. So dreams, a lot of people have dreams, but very few succeed in this world who are living their dreams. So how do they do? What did they do? That's what people want to. So in my personal case, I come up with a message that's very universal. Taking that message, then I look inside and what stories or what life experiences I have that fit that message. And I use a simple formula, 3 stories, 3 different points for that speech, 3 different short stories. Or in some cases, it could be a long story, just one story that flows. But if I use a long story, instead of 3 distinct points, I still have 3 sections within that story that are distinct, and they flow into as a one long story without the audience realizing. So look at the 2014 winner. His was on, I see something in you. Many people say, hey, I did not have confidence myself, but someone told me, hey, I see something in you. And he told the audience, hey, I see something in you. He won. 2015 winner from Saudi Arabia. His message is power of words. Communication, that's another important topic. Hey, that the words that we use when communicating, they have meaning and they are powerful. So we have to be careful what words we use when we communicate, whether it's a child or an adult. For example, the Verity Price speech, but a message from a father, something, hey, she starts off saying, hey, I'm living in the basement of my sister. Hey, I'm a poor Joe. I did not start with successful. So people want to see, hey, you had a problem and I can relate to that problem. And what did you do to solve that problem? What happened in your life that you now are happy that you resolved that issue? And that's what people are looking for. So message, what do you want the audience to remember about your speech? Then what life experiences? Sometimes people say, how long does it prepare to a speech for the International Speech Contest? My answer is a lifetime. You look into yourself, in your inner self, your inside you, say, what has happened to me in my life and how did I overcome those adversities? And that's the information you share with your audience. Back to you, Toastmaster Fahim.
Thank you. Excellent response, DTM Sarfraz. So what I take away from it is, first thing first, why are you competing? Find the answer within you that will help you come up with the topic and the message. And then obviously the rest, you talk about the practical stuff, how to go about it. Why don't I get the viewpoint of DTM Talha bin Hamid? You have been delivering some cracking speeches week on week, and every time you do deliver it, we know who's gonna get the first prize in the club. So your take, sir, please.
Thank you so much. For the record, Toastmaster Fahim, no one, including you, votes for me in my club. So yeah, let's get that out of the way and let's remove the good impression you tried to make before the audience. I have, it's a puzzle that I have yet to solve. What makes a great speech? And the answer is that there's so many things that can make a great speech. There's no one-size-fits-all solution. Something that I've learned, first of all, as DTM Sarfraz pointed out, and as Adeline said, it has to be a story, and preferably a story of crisis and redemption. That always works the best. Secondly, it should come from your own personal life. I mean, there is absolutely no question in my mind that this is the only way to go if you're going to relate a story in a contest and you want to survive the originality test and you want to inspire the audience. It has to be a story from your life. It cannot be someone else's story. So I tell myself every time I'm writing a story or trying to deliver a speech or advising some contestant, come for it with a grand perspective. When you're going on stage, think that you're going to change the world. When you're going to stage, think that you will do and say some things on stage that you've never done before. And thirdly, you will tell the audience something. You will make them see something that they never have seen before or experienced before. If you have those three things in mind, and coupled with the fact that they need to come from your personal life, I believe that each and every one of us has a potentially world-changing idea within us, world-changing story within us. We just have to dig it out and deliver it. And I know it sounds like a cliche, but when you're on the stage, I believe that you should be more conscious about meeting your own goals and your own aspirations about what your speech what you want your speech to be, rather than competing with anyone else. Over to you, panel moderator.
Great, thank you, DTM Talha. What a powerful message there. Have a world-changing message and you will just do fine. Once again, look at the ways from your point of view, what you can bring to the world, and then just deliver it. And I want to now reach out to obviously Toastmaster Urusa. I haven't had the pleasure, and it's my own unfortunate that I miss out when she is presenting in the club something. But I have witnessed her speak twice in the club, and the way she articulates the words, the way she gives the message, is so unique. And that's why I would like really her perspective on how we can go about choosing the topic. So Toastmaster Urusa, over to you, please.
Thank you so much, Toastmaster Fahim, for those lovely words. Now, before me, Toastmaster Adeline, DTM Sarfraz, and DTM Talat, they have pretty much covered all of the bases. They have covered what the topic should look like. They have covered, so all of it has been covered. What I would like to add, and it will be really simple, is the delivery should be really good. Because I, as a judge, when I am judging, I am looking for wonderful delivery. The words, they should be simple. The way it is coming out and the way you're speaking, that should be simple. That should be easy. That should be understandable. People should be entertained when you're speaking. They shouldn't be bored. They shouldn't be, they're sitting and they're dozing off. That shouldn't happen. So when people are speaking, when you're speaking, when you're whatever your topic is, it could be anything, whatever you've chosen, it should be according to the audience, whoever they are. So that is my 2 bits on this.
Thank you, Toastmaster Urusa. I think you identified some really important points here, and that's where I want to move on next. You mentioned that audience should be entertained. They shouldn't be bored. It should be amusing. And that's where I want to go next with my panelist here. How important is the humor in the speech? And whether that having more humor in the speech really gets you up there in winning the contest. So why don't I know DTM Sarfraz kinds of bring a lot of humor in his speeches all the time, and most of the time really surprisingly from his real life, as I mentioned, with his romantic endeavors here. So why don't I go to you, sir, DTM Sarfraz?
Thank you. Adding humor, especially in an international speech contest speech, is not a requirement. But if you have been paying attention, all great speeches have some humor because the subject matter is emotional. Sometimes it's very emotional based on the story that the speaker is telling. So you need humor to release some of the pressure that the audience is feeling. If I give a serious speech and there's no humor, I'm bringing the audience down, but I'm finishing the speech and the audience is still down. So the humor so when you say something seriously, or you say, hey, you can realize your dream, next sentence should be something that makes people laugh and that you're bringing them back up. So a good speech is one that puts people on a roller coaster. So you take them on high, bring them down, and then lift them back up. So humor is important. And I tell people, people say, oh, I'm not funny, I'm not a comedian. You don't have to be a comedian. Comedy is not the same as humor. You're not telling jokes. And some CEOs, especially in their speeches, they used to open, oh, let me tell you a funny thing that happened on the way to here. That's not humor. Humor is just a twist on some words, where you're talking about 3 things, you mention 2 things, and third thing falls in the same category, but you put it on a tangent or change the trajectory of that item, and that's people laugh about it. So I tell people, don't focus on humor. Don't think about humor at all when you're preparing your speech. Once you've prepared your speech, then you go back and see where can you modify some of the words. For example, in a speech where I talk about dreams, I used to end it by saying, I'm standing here to tell you that sometimes dreams do come true. And I ended there and then transition was next one. And this is about the Sears catalog, which is, a very ordinary store. Anybody can go and buy, purchase. So that was my story. But My father gave me a catalog from Sears. And I said, hey, I looked at the pictures, I dreamed about it, and one day my dream came true. And then I transitioned. Then one time when I thought about it, I said, hey, I have a good opportunity to add humor here. So when I ended the story by saying, hey, dream do come true. And then I said, I wish my father had brought home a catalog from Neiman Marcus, which is a highfalutin store where rich people go there. And people burst into. And recently, I used that story in my keynote at District 50 conference, and someone came up to me later, said, "I can't believe how you easily use that humor." So it wasn't much of a challenge. It's just a matter of looking at this saying, "Hey, can I use some words?" 3 things I mentioned, where saying, "Hey, are you single, shy, and lonely?" And when I repeat that, "Hey, at the time I was single, shy, and lonely," people are not going to laugh. So I changed it. I said, "At that time I was student. I was single, shy, and stupid." And people laughed. Instead of saying lonely, because people are not going to laugh. Stupid, they say, our students are stupid. So just prepare your speech, then say, where can I make a little twist or add a word or two or a sentence that makes people laugh and releases the tension that I've created from my story. And then you transition to your next point. So humor is important. And in my last semifinal that I competed, one of the persons was a member of my district, and he had taken 3rd place in the semifinals the previous year. So he was there also, see how the contest goes. Afterwards during my speech, I said something which is called a callback technique, and people laughed. He timed it, and he said there were 21 seconds, and which means, see, I cannot talk or speak. I have to pause, wait for the audience to stop laughing. 21 seconds doesn't seem long, but that's a long time, 21 seconds within a speech. 3 times people laugh for 21 seconds, that's 1 minute out of speech is gone that you're not saying a word. And I thought, hey, that reinforced that humor is important with speeches. The longer the people laugh, the better the judges. Yeah, man, this is a good speech. So make people think, make people feel, and make people laugh. Back to you, Toastmaster Fahim.
Great. Thank you so much. So just taking away from you, humor is not necessary, but it's important. But the key thing is that it's easy to put the humor in than you might think. Just look at your speech and see where you can put it. Just go in a quiet room and you will come up with the ideas. Great words there. Why don't I go to Toastmaster Urusa, since you mentioned it that we need to entertain the audience. So how do you suppose we can add the humor, and whether it is important to add the humor in the speech?
Yes, Toastmaster Fahim, it is very important. I believe speeches that have some element of humor, they always rate better than speeches that are very flat or were very serious. Because obviously people love laughing, and even the judges also enjoy a good laugh. So obviously the speeches will perform better. It is not necessary, obviously, as the DTM Sarfraz said, you do not need to make a full speech out of jokes or out of having instances of humor. You can just add it in one place. You can add it in the beginning, opening, or in the ending, or in the middle somewhere. Just add it there so it is light. That is it. Over to you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Toastmaster Urusa. Now, Adeline, I want to come back to you, but with a point on again the choosing a topic. Okay. But this time, I want you to put a spin on how important it is that you have whether it is important to have the emotional element in the speech. We talked about the humor, and 2 of these panelists mentioned, yes, it is important, and that's how you can add it. But how important it is to put the emotional spin around your topic?
Ken, before I jump into that, can I just take 1 second to summarize a little of what I took away from what Toastmaster Sarfraz said? Because I completely agree with you. It's not a humorous speech, but having humor as key points. And given that you're 5 days to your contest, here would be my shortcut suggestion to the contestants. So 3 areas. The first is the opening. Get people to laugh in the first 15, 20 seconds, right? And because opening, they don't really know you yet. Maybe your club, they do, but just assume that most of them don't know you very well. So look for some kind of self-deprecating humor, right? So for example, Toastmaster Safaras, you can make a joke about hair, right? Something that is very easy. It's not the most intellectual humor, but some kind of self-deprecating humor that warms the audience to you. The second one, as Toastmaster Safaras said, at your key emotional moment, right? Your saddest moment, someone just died or something critical just happened. Put in that humor there, that twist that gets people to laugh, right? So wherever your key emotional moment is, take that twist, because then you start to bring them up again, like what Toastmaster Safaras said. Then the third place to look for, and this is the shortcut method, in your closing, you want to end on a high. And a good kind of humor is, as Toastmaster Safaras did, a callback, right? So the joke on whatever you opened with, you had the catalog, and then you close with the high-end catalog, something like that. It's a nice twist. It's not the most intellectual humor, but it gets people to laugh as you close off. So if you're 5 days to your speech and you're looking for some quick wins, those are the 3 areas: opening, key emotional moment, and closing. Okay, then now let me answer your question, which was the question you had asked me, which was around the emotions in the speech. And I would say what I learned in this one contest was, hey, there are 7 power emotions as you pick a story, and try and find a story that can hit as many of these 7 power emotions as possible. And I'm going to share my screen again. Again, I'll send all these slides out so you don't have to take notes. So if you see this, okay, come on, let's cooperate with me here. So the 7 power emotions are, you'll see some versions of this, but this is what I use: fear, anger, disgust, sadness, happiness, surprise, and then love, or trust as a form of love. So try and find a personal story that hits as many of these power emotions at a high level. So you want to find one where you really, really felt fear, or you really, really felt disgust, right? And probably as the story moves on, as the related stories move, you try and hit as many of these power emotions in that. And here's something I didn't understand until I took part in this contest. Very often we focus a lot on details, right? We tell people about this was what's happening, this is what the weather was like, this is all the people who are all there. Audiences don't connect here. They don't connect on the details of these facts and figures and details, right? Where they really connect is here, the emotions. So that's why hitting these power emotions in your story, in your speech overall, but through your stories, is so powerful. Right. So in my story, if you watched, I think I did my bear story here. In my bear story, obviously, it was about fear. So there was a lot of fear at various points when we met the bear, when the bear approached my mother and all that. There was also, disgust at how selfish I was. And this is not your emotion. This is the emotion you want the audience to feel. So the audience felt, disgust because I was quite selfish in the beginning. And at the end, not at the end, in the middle of the story, when I stepped up to defend my mother, there was a lot of love there, right? Anyone who's had a mother, anyone who is a mother would feel that you understand that you would do anything to protect your loved ones. So you try and find stories that incorporate this, and then you really stretch those emotions as much as you can, and as you tell your story. Hopefully that helps. Back to you, Toastmaster Fahim.
Great. Thank you, Toastmaster Adeline. Some really powerful words there. 7 emotional and powerful words that you want to use to connect with your audience. And I really like what you said about don't worry about the mind, connect to their heart. And that's where those 7 powerful emotional words come in. I want to go to now DTM Tala. So we have clearly established here that the emotions and the humor is important. And I know you can certainly do that in your speeches. How would you advise the participants to go about doing it?
I have 3 words: self-deprecating humor. That's the only way to go. That is the only safe way. And trust me, audience will laugh so much because they love it when you make a mess. They love it when you fail. They love it when you slip. remember, how many of you have watched Charlie Chaplin movies? I mean, pretty much everyone has watched some clips, right? And why are they so funny? Because Charlie Chaplin is making a fool of himself all the time. And he's known to be the greatest comedic actor ever, right? Nobody likes clever people because people are not clever. And they don't like to be reminded of that fact by someone who has a greater intellect than them. So frequently, and this is what I've noticed, sometimes when you try to build too sophisticated a humor in a speech, it lands flat. Even when people are actually acknowledging or they are understanding what you're saying, they're secretly hating you. They're not loving you because they think that you're being too clever. You're being too high-minded for your own good. So it is best to be dumb. It is best to do self-deprecating humor. And if you don't have sources of good self-deprecating humor in your real life, congratulations, Einstein. But all of us have those. You just have to dig deep enough. You just have to be vulnerable. And secondly, I would slightly differ with the other panelists here. Of course, approaches change, but I have found in some speeches I saw that a very finely tuned joke came right in the middle of a very tragic situation. And to me at least, and that's a personal feeling, that transition was very jarring. It was disrespectful because at one moment you're talking about somebody dying, and on the very next second you're making a joke out of that situation. So while it may not be your intent, but to some, like for example to me as an audience member, that may come across as exploiting that moment to add humor. So maybe it would be advisable to give some breathing space between your transitions between tragedy and humor. That can also be one good approach. Again, your ear will tell you when you will revise your speech, you will know yourself that whether that speech is well balanced or not. You just need to be very sensitive, and you just have to read it and to see your video with the eyes of an audience rather than as a creator of that speech. So yeah, I believe humor is important. It is always helpful to have humor, but humor should be matching with the content of your speech. It should not be just some jokes tacked onto the speech. Those of us who have gone through the old curriculum, it had a whole manual on humorous speeches called Humorously Speaking. And it specifically told us that humorous speech is not a succession of jokes. It is not some jokes artificially tacked on around a central idea. It has to have humor built in. It has to be part of the story. So be very careful about that the humor should be a perfect match. It should be original. And the only way for you to ensure that it is original is when it comes from your real life. There's no other way. Because we hear so many jokes every day. We enjoy jokes, and we never know if we appropriate some joke without, knowing it. And some judge challenges it or contestant challenges it. This joke is not original, and you're using an unoriginal punchline to add weight to your speech. You don't want to be in that situation. So bring the humor from your real life, make it appropriate to the speech. And in my personal opinion, allow the humor and the serious parts to breathe a little bit before transitioning. Over to you, panel moderator.
Thank you, DTM Tala. So 2 takeaways I certainly take it from there is the timing of the joke in your speech and play dumb. But hopefully not in your real life. Otherwise, TM Urusa will nowhere near you. That I think your what you said about DTM Talha is bring me right back into the next point that I want to discuss, and that's the vocabulary in the speech. And attached to that is the command on the English language. Now, I've had participants tell me, and I've had these concerns myself as well in the past, is how important is for a speaker to have a good command of English. Obviously, it's going to be an English speaking contest. So first thing, how important is the good command of English? And participant doesn't feel like they have that level of command of English, what can they do to help overcome that? Obviously, it's a long learning process, but in the next 5 days, what they can do to overcome that. And secondly, connected to that is how important is the use of non-ordinary, for the lack of better word here, non-ordinary English words that we don't use day to day, but that have a really good impact if we use it. How important is that to use those words? And also, I just realized that the time is now 8:15, and it's just gone fly by. We still have got a number of things to discuss. So may I just remind the panelists, please, to limit yourself to 2 minutes per discussion point. Over to you, DTM Thala.
All right, vocabulary. Now, this is a tough ask because at times we feel good when we use good words, and it enthralls us. It gives us joy if we are able to pull off some feats of language. But remember, we are not doing it for ourselves. We are doing it for an audience and for the judges. And some of the judges even may have a limited command of English language. Keep that in mind, because we don't exactly run an IELTS test before appointing judges, right? I wish we could, but we don't. So you have to make it as journal as possible. And the best bet is to keep it simple, because elegance and beauty can be achieved even with simple words. Try not to use a word that you're not familiar with, that you feel that an audience member or a judge may not be familiar with, because that may be the crux of your speech, and the judge may entirely miss the point of your speech if they don't know that word. So I would suggest strongly that simplify your speech and have it read by, maybe if you have kids, younger brothers or teenagers around you or children, and ask them if they understand it with a reasonable command, of course, because I understand that there are marks for language and grammar. So it cannot be a complete disaster in terms of linguistics. It has to be elegant, it has to be coordinated, it has to have good words, but maybe nothing too fancy. And the best example would be the speeches that are made at the World Championship. I bet that there's not a single word uttered in those speeches which you do not understand, and yet you are entertained by the language. So it is a very hard balance to achieve, but if you're unsure, err towards simplicity. Over to you, panel moderator.
Thank you, DTM Thala. So elegant and beauty can be achieved with single words. And the practical advice, have it read by junior members of your family or audience to see if they understand it, and then you get the idea from there. Thank you. Why don't I go to DTM Sarfraz here? What's your take on the use of the non-ordinary English words and the advice if the people do not have a good command of English?
Thank you, Toastmaster Fahim. One is, you don't have to use language like some of the words of the day or word of the week in meetings. People come with a word that you will never use it. And when I hear that word, just to be someone who uses the word during the meeting, I use it. But then when I see that word on the agenda, I say, where am I going to use it? And if I use it, people say, hey, what planet did he come from? So English words should be simple. Now, what I focus on is that I should not use the same word throughout my speech. For example, recently I heard a speech, personal or social. He used the word social so many times that all I remembered about the speech was the word social. So use thesaurus. Put on a word and say, look at some other words. What's a word that's a nice word that can replace that word, so that you're not repeating the same word. Then pronunciation. Look at the words in the dictionary. How is it pronounced? And if you're competing at the international level, not only pronunciation, your enunciation is also be. For example, roll, R-O-L-L. I just say, oh, roll. And people don't know what I just said. So it's roll or cool. We just say cool. It's a cool. So the first time when I competed against Ed Tate, I lost by 1 point out of 18 judges, and that's not bad. Main reason I lost was my enunciation was not too good in that contest. And I knew it. And when I talked to Ed Tate after the contest later on, he mentioned it also. So a year later, when I advanced to the semifinals again, this time I changed. On my speech, I took several pieces of paper. I wrote every word, about 1,000 words, whatever the speech was, and looked in the dictionary, the pronunciation, and then how, like very, instead of saying very, very, you raised your voice a little bit. So look at the dictionary to see how it's pronounced. Look at the thesaurus, so see if you can use different words for the same word that or simple word that you're using, and then try to enunciate correctly. Now, in my personal experience, if I have a word that I have difficulty saying it correctly, instead of forcing myself to say it in the speech, I take that word out and replace it with something that I can easily say it. Back to you, Toastmaster Fahim.
Great, thank you. So not only focus on the use of the words, but also the pronunciation, really practical advice there. Thank you. Why don't I ask the TM Toastmaster Adeline here, when you prepare your speech, how do you go about using the words here? And what is your criteria of selecting the words when you have an option?
Actually, both panelists have answered it so well. I have nothing to add. It's exactly as they said. The simpler, the better. And make sure we pronounce the words you are using, you can pronounce well, otherwise change it out.
Great.
So, thank you.
Sure. Toastmaster Urusa, do you want to add something here?
Well, they've pretty much covered it. People who do not have, just one thing, people do not have a good command of English cannot really work well with vocabulary as well. So if they try to add on vocabulary, that really comes off badly in grammar. So instead of, trying and, worrying about, getting good vocabulary, getting good English, just don't go till that level. Just work with what you have. Be simple, be easy. Over to you.
Great stuff. Focus on the essentials. Everything else will take care of it. Sir Sarfraz, you want to add something?
Yeah, just quick example. District 122, several speeches I've heard where people use career. So when they're talking about career, but they say carrier is, DHL, delivery person. Career is the one, and that's easy, simple. I've used, people using it. Now, when the person mispronounces it, I can understand what they're saying. And I'm sure if you were doing that in the speech contest, judges will understand, but judges will take points off. And it's a close contest. You don't want to lose just because you said a word. And the other mistake I've seen is singular plural. The people don't pay attention. So you have to make sure that, verb, nouns, they match the singular plural. They leave the S singular word or the plural something. So those are simple techniques that people need to keep in mind if English is not your first language. Back to you.
Great, thank you. Again, the pronunciation of the words is just extremely important to get the right message across. I now want to touch upon on the speech content, and something that we have already touched upon is the starting of the speech and the conclusion of the speech, because that's are really powerful, where you can make an impact and connect with the audience. You have the opportunity. We already talked about perhaps starting with some sort of humor as a starting point, particularly self-deprecating humor. What other things you would suggest to make a really impactful and powerful starting point other than humor or the self-deprecating humor? TM Adeline, do you want to go on this one first?
Sure. So I think the what is, as you mentioned, is critical, right? The opening with impact is critical in the first, preferably 3 to 5 seconds, maximum 20 seconds. You need to grab attention, and it must be appropriate to the speech. So I can give some ideas here, but obviously it must be relevant to the topic, must be relevant to the theme. Use all the things at your disposal. Introduce a prop that no one's expecting. Use pauses. Use a bold statement. Use a big gesture. I mean, you've seen people fall on stage. You've seen people turn around. Because your body is the asset that you have on the stage, right? So be creative. Be as creative as possible. And the key thing is grab that attention. Over to you.
Great, thank you, Toastmaster Adeline. Toastmaster Urusa, why don't I ask you the same thing? How to make an impactful start and similarly closing it in an impactful way?
I think the most impactful starts are either humorous or there is something you do with your body that kind of attracts the attention, especially if it is online or in person. The way you move your body attracts the most kind of attention. Like in our last, I think it was the last meeting or the one before, where Toastmaster Alvin, he walked like an old man towards the podium, and that attracted everyone's attention, and he stood out throughout the whole meeting. So anything that you do with your body will remain in people's minds. Similarly, closing, either you can use quotes. I personally do not like quotes in closing, because that is a very that kind of flattens your speech when you end with a quote. But that is a personal preference. Give some message, add a CTA, even if it is a one-liner. Give something that people can take away with them. That stays with them. So it does not have to be very like something big. It can be something very small, but it gives a proper message to the person. That leaves a good closing. Over to you.
Sure, great. Thank you, Toastmaster Rusa. Now, DTM Talha and DTM Sir Sarfraz, we have seen obviously your speeches, and you bring all sorts of startups, right from the joke, the action, the body thing. So the stage is open to you if you want to add any comments here on the starting or the conclusion. So please go ahead, whoever want to go first.
DTM Talha, you want to go first, or?
Sir, you go first.
Oh, okay. Adeline already mentioned, you want the humor within the first few sentences. She mentioned 20 seconds at the max, so rough rule would be 15 seconds, or in the third. And when I first started competing, I used to do research and find a story that I could open the speech with that then tied into my speech. The problem was it took too long. Sometimes the story was about 1 minute, and if I shorten the story, then people won't understand. And the second problem was that some people had already heard it. So I did get the laughter from the audience, but it didn't have the impact that I wanted. So I decided, hey, I need to shorten it. And when I'm giving a speech, look and see what's important at that time. What's something that happening? For example, my leading to dreams. I had a long thing, people are doing such and such to succeed, and nothing. It took too long. So I opened by just saying the famous TV show at that time when I competed at the district level was Deal or No Deal. It's a show where 26 models, beautiful girls, are standing with the cases, silver cases, and you pick a number. So there's no general knowledge. Like Jeopardy, you have to have general knowledge to win Jeopardy game show. This one, you just pick numbers and are lucky if you get the right numbers. So I opened by a sentence, have you seen NBC's Deal or No Deal? I asked the question, and this time it was not a rhetorical question. I paused and raised my hand. So I want several people had seen it was popular. Then I said, then it's a show that requires absolutely no brains. And audience burst into laughter. So two things, it was very short, 2 sentences, I got the laughter. And then when people laugh and start, and judges heard the laughter, judges are now in tune, plus the audience say, hey, I don't want to miss any word what the speaker has to say. So bring the humor quick, and don't use someone else's stories. Just say something that you can make the people laugh from all just ordinary words usage.
Sure. And what would your suggestion be on the making a conclusion? How can one go about making an impactful conclusion?
Okay, conclusion. Some people end with a quote. You don't want to end on a quote that someone else says. So I ended. There's 2 parts of a conclusion thing. One is where you summarize. Hey, this is what I just told you, and so you summarize what you've told them, and then it should be a call of action, indirectly or directly. So that's how you need to end it. It's not important that the last sentence should be humorous, but it's all right if you want to. Where in a speech I was talking about the dance lessons, for example, where I said, I got snookered in by the commercial that I saw on TV, and I went for $9 for an introductory offer, but they were actually wanting me to come in so they could sign me up for several $100s. And then I mentioned that when I went there, I had, a shirt, $40 shirt, a clone, $20. And at the end, I knew the MasterCard people have seen the commercial where, they talk about priceless. So I talked about the three things, shirt, $40, dance lessons, $199 or $299, and then learning a lesson in life, priceless. And people laughed because they could relate to that MasterCard. I didn't say MasterCard, but people knew what I said. So if you can use humor, fine, but don't force it, because then people know that you're forcing. Don't force it. But it works. But you should summarize. Summary that what did you? That doesn't mean you repeat what you said. That's a different way of saying it, but you want to summarize so that people know you're concluding. Without saying in my summary or in conclusion, that looks like that you're just learning how to give speeches.
Okay, great stuff. Thank you. So just to summarize, starting, if you can make it humorous, make it humorous. You give some examples there, make it short, but make it punchy. Conclusion, call of action, and if you can again possibly add humor, add it, but don't push it. Over to you, DTM Talha. Just again on if you want to add something on the starting or on the end.
Sure. First of all, thank you so much, the other three panelists, for covering some of my pet peeves. Number one being using quotes. Number two, saying, I will start by saying, or I'll conclude by saying, because yes, we absolutely hate it when people do this, especially experienced speakers, because we are reminded that we're listening to a speech. We don't want to be reminded of that fact. So starting with humor, I believe, is a good strategy. It's a win-win situation because you can't really fail if you start with a humor. But then maybe you'll also maybe struggle to stand out because that's what everybody else will be trying to do. So maybe you pick up a dramatic movement from your speech and start with that. Play with the format, right? For example, have you seen cold opens of various TV shows these days, especially serials? They usually open in the middle of a climactic situation, and then the whole show follows and it tells you how it got there. I have frequently been accused of taking too long to get to the point of my speech, and sometimes the entire speech is close to finishing, and in the very last sentence, people figure out that this is what it was all about. And I don't like that, but repeating the same projects again and again forces you to try to do something different, right? So one approach could be to bring in a dramatic situation, a climactic situation that would occur later in your speech and open with that. Secondly, of course, humor could be there. Thirdly, give a sensational statement, a fact that jerks people away. For example, you could say that give a statement that is controversial, or controversial in the sense that people are not expecting it, right? Only yesterday I was looking at watching a YouTube video, and the person gave an example. He said, "Do you know that more people are alive today that have ever died?" So that's a perfect attention grabber, right? People will start thinking, "Oh, what's this guy saying?" But of course, as Adeline said, it should be relevant to your speech. And finally, the conclusion. There's so many ways to conclude, except for a quote, because please, for God's sake, don't end with a quote. But you can end with a lesson or a moral, or maybe a personal remark, or maybe you can throw a rhetorical question to the audience as a call to action, as DTM Sarfraz suggested that I'm starting throwing my garbage away today. What about you, Mr. Contest Chair, or something like that? So that could also be a good conclusion. Finally, it could be something, it is slightly risky though. It could be a sentence that changes the whole context of the speech, especially if it's a story. But again, for that, it has to be, it is risky, and maybe some people will not get the point. So it's highly risky. And lastly, there could be one more technique to end, and that would be to go right back to the title of your speech. Incorporate that title in the last sentence so that it makes it a elegant, beautiful package from start to finish. And when you will try to do that, you will also think how your conclusion is tying with your starting and your topic. And you'll become honest with yourself and your audience by sticking to the point. So those are the few suggestions to end the speech. Over to you.
Thank you, DTM Tala. Some really good practical points there, especially on the conclusion. Is don't end with a quote. Never end with a quote. At least we are now clear about it. Do not end with a quote. Try to be unique. Try connect it with your subject line. Could be a call of action, as DTM Sarfraz also mentioned. And on the starting, you mentioned have it relevant. Could even be a controversial line of a statement just to connect with the audience straight away and get them thought-provoking. So really some good stuff here. Now I've got a lot more questions still, but I now realize the time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to still perhaps reach out to panelists offline and at least try and cover these questions in a kind of one statement way. But right now I want to open the floor to the questions from the audience, because I know a lot of them are online and they would have some burning questions based on what we have heard from panelists. So unless panelists have got something to add, and if you're happy for me to open the floor to the questions. Sure. So here you go. Here you got your chance. Go on, Sir Sarfraz.
Just a piece of advice. If you go to YouTube, you'll find all kinds of speeches, especially World Championship speeches. See how they opened, and then go to the end. How did they conclude? So, for example, DTM Talha mentioned that you can use the title that at Tate that I competed against, the 2000 World Championship speech that he gave, the title was One of Those Days. And he repeats that theme, it was one of those days. And he said a few times at the end when he was about to say it, he didn't say it. He just stood there, pointed his hands towards the audience. Audience said, one of those days. And he ended it. And by the time he walked on the stage, everybody knew that he was going to win. So that's one way. Also, 2001, Darren LaCroix. In his opening, he comes and he falls as if something went wrong and he fell. And then he stays down when he tries to get up, he says, did I stay down too long? And people started laughing. There's no humor, but people laughed because they knew, hey, this was part of a speech. 2015 winner from Saudi Arabia, world champion, Qahtani, he burned a lighter and a cigarette and tried to light it a few times. And everybody said, he's going to light a cigarette on stage? And then he said, oh, did you think I was really going to light? So see, there's different ways of using humor, different ways of opening or concluding. For example, the 2016 winner, he had underwear, white fruit of the loom, white underwear outside his pants. And he did the same letter there and talked about bullying, getting bullied, and then he asked the same question like Daniel, hey, did I leave the underwear on too long? So to win, there's 100 points on the judging score. To win this World Championship, you need to score 110. Back to you.
Great stuff. Thank you, DTM Sarfraz. So just a point here that there is a world of information in terms of videos and the suggestions out there on the internet. One just has to Google it, just get all the finalists on the YouTube, and we can learn from it so much. The creative ways of ending and starting, and the humor, and the easiest way to add humor to it. Okay, so without further ado, why don't I open the floor to the questions? So audience, you have the opportunity here to whether ask in person in your own vocal voice, or even you can just write it on the chat and I can narrate it out for you. So feel free to please jump in and ask the questions.
Right, there's one question from Rabia from chat, and also Toastmaster Irfan has raised his hand, so maybe you can start with those.
Yes, go ahead, Sir Irfan, Irfan Farooqi, on your question.
Thank you very much. What I wanted to know was that sometimes we are trying to deliver a speech and we believe that it is a very, very known theme. For instance, the hare and turtle, slow and steady wins the race. But it is not the same story. But whatever I'm going to say, and people would think that it is the same topic. So do you think, would it be considered as copying a well-known theme, or would it be acceptable? I'm not repeating the same story at all, but maybe the end of the theme is the same. So generally the theme is the same, but it's altogether a different thing. But I'm saying it would conclude that yes, slow and steady wins the race. Anybody?
I would like to answer that. So yeah, Toastmaster Irfan, first of all, I believe that it's best to err on the side of caution. If you need to ask yourself whether you are fulfilling the originality test or not, you probably are not, right? It's, some judge may interpret it as a creative reinvention of something that is already too well known, and they may let it go, but there may be someone who may decide to challenge you. And perhaps it's not too wise to take that chance, right? Because if some judge raises a challenge and they then, call the speaker for the so-called process of protest, and they manage to convince the other judges, right? While listening to the arguments from one judge, the other judges are convinced. And if they vote that, you are disqualified, then perhaps one needs to think that it was not a chance worth taking. Secondly, I would also point you to the World Championship of Public Speaking speeches. I don't think there's any speech, and there's any passage or any stage in any speech where you would be asking yourself if this was sourced from somewhere else. I believe the speakers and Adeline can give a very good insight on that, because I've never been there. But perhaps the contestants take special care to weed out even a remote possibility of someone accusing them of taking an idea or a passage from somewhere. That's the way I see it, because so far in several years of witnessing all 8 speeches of World Championship, and this time, thanks to Adeline, the semifinals as well, I've never once found myself asking or wondering whether this is original or not. So that would be my take on this. Maybe someone else would like to add or give their own take. Over to you, moderator.
Thank you, DTM Talha. Yes, please, any of the other 3 panelists, if you have anything to add on the question from Sir Irfan Farooqi, please do add here. Otherwise, I've got the other question that I can ask.
Sure. If I can just answer that briefly. So I think the message doesn't have to be unique, right? So like you said, slow and steady wins the race. I think that's fine. Now, the story, if you're going to use a well-known story, let's say you're using the story of the turtle, the tortoise, and the hare, right? Which is where the phrase came from. That's okay, but have a twist on it, because as Toastmaster Safarah said, there must be something unique, some insight that you're giving. So it's okay to use those kinds of childhood stories, nursery stories, or common folklore type stories, but there must be a twist to it. And then the other extreme, as Toastmaster Talha said, plagiarism is obviously out, right? So if you're going to do a whole speech that someone else has done, especially if it's a World Championship speech, then clearly don't do it. But I think if you want to tell a common story, just make sure that there's some twist to it, so that it's a little not boring for the audience.
I probably couldn't explain my point. For instance, I'm telling the story of my own life. It is altogether my own life. I'm saying that I was very lazy, and there was somebody in my family who was very fast. But at the end, I tell the whole story of me and him, and at the end, I conclude that I am more successful than him. Now, people may think this is the same story as the hare and the turtle. So then that's what I'm saying. The whole story is unique, but the end message can resemble from very well-known saying, drama, TV play, song, but that story is altogether my own story. Nothing plagiarism.
Then I think it's okay. To me, it's okay. And preferably if you can look for a twist to it, a play on the word, right? Because everyone knows slow and steady wins the race. But if you can make slow and something else wins it's like some kind of twist to that common saying, that will be even more insightful. But in basic, there's nothing wrong with, as you said, the story is unique to you. The saying is something that is, people are familiar with, but just make it a twist. That'll be excellent. Back to you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
like slow and stupid
Sorry.
wins the race. And people, hey, what did you say? I mean, they're not asking. So yeah, that I agree with Adeline. Twist. You don't have to use it exactly. The moment you say, slow and steady win the race, even if it's your story, people, I've heard this turtle thing so many times. So slight twist. Hey, or if you want to bring in what you're saying, you can bring in saying, oh, you may have heard slow and steady win the race. But I think it's sometimes slow and stupid wins the race. Now people want to know, hey, what happened to you why you're saying this? Then you go on into your own story.
Sure, some great advice there. Thank you, DTM Sarfaraz. I think Toastmaster Rabia wants to ask the question. Toastmaster Rabia, are you there?
I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
Okay, so my question is that all the panelists, most of the panelists say that we need to bring a little bit of humor in our speeches. But for a person who is good in delivering a speech, but not so good with bringing humor in between, it takes a lot of time and a lot of efforts just to instill in a little humor so that the audience can have some fun out of it. And I believe that, for example, if I have an hour to prepare my speech, and I'll take like 50 minutes just to pinpoint where to put in the humor, and 10 minutes will be my speech time. So is the humor worth so much of my time, preparation time, if I'm going for an international speech or a speech contest?
Thank you, Toastmaster Rabia. I hope your question is clear to the panelists. If any of you wants to jump in, please do so.
I'm going to say the same thing I've said before. Humor is not a requirement. If you use humor in your speech, there's no guarantee you're going to win. But I feel that based on what's happened last decade or so, that people expect humor in the speeches. There were 8 finalists this year. I analyzed all 8 speeches. The 3 winning speeches, they all had humor. Well, Nadini, this is me. There was some humor. Look at how the 3rd place winner, listening and understanding. He talked about his mother. My mother wanted me to become a doctor and a psychology, something, and people laughed at. So you expected to. There were 2 people who did not use humor at all, and those were among the 5 who did not place. So that doesn't mean they did not win because they didn't use humor, but there was at least some reason. So humor tells people that you have mastered the art of speaking, because people are expecting that. Even look at keynote speeches. They have serious matches. TED Talks, even people laugh. They say something funny within the speech. So it's not so don't, back to your question, you don't have to spend a lot of time. Just give the speech something, and sometimes people will laugh. For example, in my keynote, the example I've given, some of KTC members have heard me, where I say that, hey, I went to see a manager at work on a certain project, and the manager said, hey, I have 2 female employees who are fighting over you. So then in my keynote recently, when I gave in District 50, I said, hey, I never imagined that women would be fighting over me. And then I thought I need humor, so I added the humor. Hey, as you can see, I am no George Clooney. But I thought when I say George Clooney, people laugh. But what happened when in the real District 50 conference, when I was giving my speech, when I said, I never imagined women would fight over me, people started laughing. Then I had to say, do I use my George Clooney line or just take it out? So sometimes people laugh and you don't expect them to laugh, and that will happen too. So you're practicing, see what works, what didn't work. If the audience laughs at some place or giggled, then you say, hey, what can I do here to make really everyone in the audience laugh? But again, you don't have to you should first spend most of your time on structure itself, speech, and then a little bit. But see, mentally you have to say, no, you don't have to say, I'm not funny and something. You don't force you to look for. You say, how can I make my speech better? Don't think, how can I make it funny? Just think, how can I make my speech better? And that's what you're focusing on. And have somebody else look at it. So, for example, 2007, when I competed, I sent my speech to 3 world champions. One was the 1990 champion, David Brooks, 2001 champion, Darren LaCroix, and 1995 champion, Mark Brown. And I got different feedback from all those 3. I didn't tell them what to look for. I want to see what this is. And then I just decided what I'm going to accept or not accept. So you can do the same. When you prepare your speech, have someone practice it or tape it and give it to someone, say, look at it and see what works, what doesn't work. Or I say, hey, do you see a place here where I can add humor, because I can't. So ask for help if you are having difficulty. But not me. I'm not voluntary. But if you have to, yeah, talk to me if you want to.
Great,
But
thank you.
But there are several features. Fahim Razak, he's a natural. I've noticed that when he's introduced and he comes up to speak, people start laughing because they know he's funny, even before. 23rd March of this year, when he gave a speech at Beach Luxury, he came out in front of the audience dancing. And people were laughing. He had not even spoken a single word. Alvin Faraz is the other one. So he comes up, and the moment he opens his mouth, people start laughing. So you don't have to copy them. Look at their speech and see why people laughing at their speeches. What's in their speeches that is making people laugh? But the other is, if you use the humor, don't have a serious face. If people laugh, you have to have a smile on the face. Because sometimes I've seen people very seriously, and people are laughing, and that doesn't look that, hey, that was a forced. So make sure your gestures go along with your humor. Back to you, Fahim.
Thank you, DTM Sarfaraz. I'm not sure if Toastmaster Adeline or Toastmaster Urusa or DTM Tala, feel free to, if you want to add something here to TM Rabia's question.
I think it's pretty well covered, so no need from my side.
Great, thank you. Some really good points here. Again, we come back to humor, and I know it gets so very hard to add humor in, but with practice, I find it gets easier and easier. So hopefully we can get to that level as we keep practicing each week. I know Anam TM Toastmaster Anam Kadri, you have got a question, and we will make this last question, and any other questions I will try and get from a panelist offline. Hopefully they would be kind enough to give us the replies there. So Toastmaster Anam Kadri, over to you for the last question, please.
Thank you so much, Toastmaster Fahim. I just wanted to ask, the panelists today mentioned that the speech should have a speech and a message. Like Adeline also mentioned that a speech is actually your gift and message is actually the gift to the audience. What if we don't want to give a story in our speech? Like it's a few abstracts here and there and mainly the content. Would it go positive towards the judges? Or do they still look for a proper story, like a beginning, a twist, and a climax, and that type of a story? I mean, I don't get it. What is the basic definition of keeping a story in a speech? Should it be a continuous story with a few events in it that are linked together with the climax and the message and everything? Or should it can be a content integrated with the message only?
Thank you, Toastmaster Anam Kadri. Panelists, please feel free. I know, Adeline, you wanted to say something. Sorry, I interrupted you. Please go ahead.
Sure, I'll jump in with that. So there is no requirement that it must be a story. It's just obviously it must support the purpose or the message of the speech. So there's no requirement that it has to be a story or even that it has to be a personal story. I think the reason why a lot of speeches end up using personal stories is because the emotions come through. So if you do a factual speech, it's very hard for emotions to come through, right? So for example, you say, 9 in 10 startups fail. Okay, so what, right? The emotions don't come through. If you tell a story of this is my startup and it failed, there's so much more in there. So I would say there's no requirement as a story, but if you can think of another way to bring across the emotions and connect with the audience, then do that. But a story is a good way to do that. Then to your other question, does it have to be one story? Can it be 3 stories, 5 stories, 10 stories? I think DTM Safaras mentioned that it doesn't have to be just one story, and you'll see a lot of speeches can sometimes be 3. The most common are 1 and 3, to be honest. The 1 will be a pre-transformation, post-transformation kind of story, and then the 3 will be 3 related stories to that theme. It really depends. The danger of using too many stories is it's very hard. It's a 7-minute speech, right? It's not very long. By the time you set up a story and then you have the climax and the characters and all that, it's really quite hard if you have too many mini stories. So wherever possible, I would say try and stick to one key story. You can have a few side, background things, why this was so important to me, because when I was a child, this was all that. But one key story that the audience can follow would be my personal preference, than to have 3 mini stories. But having said that, there are many, many examples of winning speeches which are 3 stories. So so that's what I would say. Back to over to the other panelists, please.
Thank you, Toastmaster Adeline. So the key message is try and have one key story, but have it as a personal story so that your emotions come out and that you really connect to the audience. I know DTM Sarfraz, you mentioned that perhaps possibly have 3 stories as well. So what do you have to say on that? Maybe we need a balance here, maybe not 1, not 3, maybe 2.
No, because people think 2 is you're shortchanging. 2 is not enough. So first time when I gave a speech on keys to success, I had 3 stories, and I was not experienced enough, and no one told me. My speech was 1,040 words. To deliver that speech, which I delivered at the district at that time, 7 minutes, 20 seconds, I was speaking at the rate of 140. There's no way people are going to understand, especially people who are not used to hearing someone whose native tongue is not English. And so that's the mistake I made. Then I thought, well, I should give the speech and I should see when the yellow light comes on, and then I can cut my 3rd story out and just go with, no, it doesn't work that way. That's not the way to win a contest. So if there's 3 stories, 4 is too much. Sometimes people use the baseball. Baseball has, first base, second base, third base, and home plate. And they try to, use a baseball analogy and say 4 stories. Then the stories are too short. As Adeline mentioned, you cannot really develop the stories. So 3 stories best short, so it's just a few remarks about what the background is, set up, when it happened, where it happened, and what happened. And then what was the takeout of that story. So 3 stories work best, I've seen. Or, as I mentioned, the last time when I was at the semifinals, it was just one long story, 3 little sections, but people couldn't tell that it was 3 different parts of. And the reason I said 3, because they took place different. The story started in United States, then goes to Pakistan, can come back to United States. So there were 3 parts, but it went as one long story. So you can have a long story, 3. But if I'm giving a lot of facts and figures, as Adeline mentioned, people looks more like a lecture. So people want to say, hey, here's my theme. And then this personally has happened to me, then people can relate. Hey, I can relate to it. If I tell you, hey, I read a book and I want to tell you how people are becoming millionaires. Bill Gates did this thing. Steve Jobs did this. No, people don't want to hear that. They want to hear, hey, Talha, what did you do to succeed? Fahim, what did you do? How did Urusa overcome her adversities? So use personal stories, whether it's 1 or 3. But you can throw in some facts, 9 out of 10. But the whole speech cannot be facts and figures, quotations from others. Then people look like you just did research, put together some material. And so that might be a good speech. People say, hey, I enjoyed your speech, but not winning. It goes back to what is your purpose? When I'm competing, my purpose is I'm going to win. I'll do everything possible. And final advice is, I've seen people compete at the club level. If they don't win, they drop out. No, attend the area, division, district, see what it takes to win. Why are these people winning? And then people say, oh, I'll wait till next year and then compete again. And you are going to fail again. Never drop out. If your objective is to win, see what's it making. Go all the way to World Championship, watch those speeches. And these days, for KTC, they record that. Look at the recordings. Look at the semifinals and videos. So define your objective. Again, if it's to have nice topic and material to present, that's fine. But if your purpose is to win the contest, then you have to modify it. Hey, what it takes to win, and I'm going to do that, whatever it takes to win. And a final comment on Rabia said, I'm not funny. Right after I joined Toastmasters, a friend of someone became a friend, and he became the second in command, which is now PQD, Program Quality Director. He asked me to be district chief judge. And I said, okay, I didn't know what a district chief. And then 4 weeks later, he said, oh, at the Toastmasters Leadership Institute, you have to do a judges training. So I didn't know what the judges, people that were in the judges training, they would have been Toastmasters for 30, 50 years. So I just presented the forms, and this is what you do, how you judge, halo effect, no halo. And one person in the audience or the evaluation wrote down, Mr. Nazir is very dry. That's an ouch moment. And after that moment, I work together that I'll never, ever give someone a chance to say, Mr. Nazir is dry. So just think of that. I didn't say, oh, my goal now to become a comedian. No, I just said, I will never let anyone say that I'm dry. And the reason I was dry was because when I was growing up in Karachi, these days, some of the comedians are making millions. Back then, it was Marasi, and they were considered low respect people. Hey, anytime I said funny, people, if somebody says, hey, what are you? You want to be a Marasi? So I was downplayed. They said no. Then I worked at an American company where the general manager was very strict. If somebody said funny, he walked out of the room. So I thought, hey, humor is not appropriate in business setting. And I stopped saying anything funny until I started watching the speeches. Hey, no, you have to have humor in speeches. So best of luck to all of you who are here that you're planning competing. Do your best. And you don't control. What you control is how you prepare, practice, and deliver your speech. What you don't control is the results. Judges, there could be one judge that disliked one thing you did or one gesture you did that, and you may not win. Don't be disheartened. They said, hey, I'll come back next year and win. So keep practicing and delivering speeches, and you'll get better even if you don't win. Thank you, Fahim Razak, for organizing this session.
Thank you, DTM Sir Sarfraz. Really inspiring words here. I would just want to go to DTM Talha, if you have anything to add here, or it could be your concluding comments as well, or anything relating to the session as well, please.
Thank you so much. Yes, I'd just like to conclude by thanking everyone who attended this, number one, for making it worthwhile, for making us feel honored, and, by extension, how those people who did not attend make us feel, you can judge yourself. Secondly, I believe this was one of the most valuable sessions I've ever attended on the art and craft of speech making. It was a useful session for not just speech contest, but for speaking in general. And thirdly, I would echo DTM Sarfraz's comments here that even if you don't win, and as DTM Toastmaster Adeline said in the beginning, her experience of competing enriched her, and it was like a crash course in public speaking. That's what you should go after. You should go after the experience. The journey is the destination. And if you happen to win, it's a cherry on top. But the growth that you will see and the things you will discover about yourself, about your capabilities, that is something that will forever stay with you. And that is a real win. So I know it's a cliche when we say that everyone's a winner and, there are no losers on the stage. Oh, yes, there are. And there are winners. And there's a reason those certificates and trophies exist. And there's a reason people are sitting in a line marking ballots. Yes, there are winners. But at the same time, perhaps we can argue, it can be argued that there are no real losers. And because everybody walks away richer and more capable. And even if you don't do that magic on the stage, if you cannot impress the judges, there will be countless other people in your real life, in your office, in your family, in your friends, who you will be impressing, because none of them is doing what you are doing towards your growth. Over to you, Toastmaster Fahim.
Thank you, DTM Talab bin Hamid here. Toastmaster Arusa, what would be your closing comments here? Thank you.
Well, I would like to close on a note. I wish everyone who is competing, I hope most of the people are here. Whoever is competing, best of luck, and to keep a note of all the things that we mentioned over today here, and best of luck to all of them. Over to you.
Thank you, Toastmaster Arusa. Any of the panelists has got any comments here? Okay, good. I just want to say thank you to all our panelists for taking the time out from you. You guys are all busy executives, and just once again, thanks so much for taking time out from your daily schedules and sharing the wisdom with us. We are fortunate enough to be here and listening to you. You guys sharing what you have been through. And it's now for us to make the most of it, to take that away over the next 5 days, use it well, and deliver it to the best of our ability. And as DTM Sarfaraz said, believe in ourselves to do it. I really hope that the audience found the session helpful. And if any of the participants are on the edge, oh, I don't want to take part, oh, this is too, and hopefully this session just helps them kind of come over those fears and allow them to deliver the speech that they want to. Once again, thank you so much. Until next time, have a very good evening or the rest of the day in the case of Sir Sarfaraz. Thank you, everyone, and have a lovely bye.
And have a great tomorrow, Toastmaster Adelaide, because I believe the date has changed for you. Thank you.
Thank
you so
And
much.
Good luck
Thank
to
you so
everyone.
much.
You can do it. Yes, thank you. Thank you so much to Toastmaster Talha.
Thank you so much for.
And I've learned
Thank
so
you
much.
so
I've
much.
taken my notes as well from everything that our panelists have said.
Well,
So I'm learning
that's
so much.
an honor. That's an honor. Thank you so much, everyone.
All
And
the
it's a
best,
privilege
everyone.
having you all.